I didn't realize anything was wrong during those 6 weeks. Not while I was actually out there. Everything felt routine, almost boring, which is what you want when you're pulling a solo shift at a remote research station. It wasn't until 2 days after I got back to the city, when I started cross-referencing my personal audio logs with the station's automated seismic sensors, that I stopped sleeping. The job was simple, or it was supposed to be. I worked for a private environmental firm that monitors permafrost stability in the high desert regions of the Great Basin. Basically, I sit in a reinforced trailer for a month and a half, check the integrity of deep-bore sensors, and make sure the solar arrays don't get buried in dust. It's the kind of isolation that either breaks you or makes you very good at talking to yourself. I've been doing it for 4 years, so I thought I knew exactly how my mind handled the quiet. The station, which we just call Site 9, is located in a dry lake bed about 80 miles from the nearest paved road. It's a landscape of cracked earth, sagebrush, and heat shimmer. There are no birds out there, no coyotes, just the wind and the occasional hum of the equipment. The first few weeks were standard. I woke up at 5 a.m., made coffee, checked the data feeds, and did my perimeter walk. The only rule for Site 9 is that you never leave the trailer without the handheld GPS and the satellite radio. Not because of animals, but because the landscape is so featureless that if a dust storm kicks up, you can lose the trailer when it's only 20 feet away from you. People have died of exposure less than a minute's walk from their own front door out there. Around day 14, I noticed a discrepancy in the acoustics. The trailer has external mics, high-sensitivity ones used to record the booms caused by underground shifting. Usually the playback is just a low-frequency hiss. But that morning, while I was eating breakfast and scrolling through the overnight audio files, I heard a sound that didn't fit. It was a rhythmic thud. It wasn't the sharp crack of earth moving. It sounded heavy, like something dense hitting the soft silt of the lake bed. Thump. Pause. I checked the external cameras, but the visibility was poor due to the morning haze. I told myself it was just a loose cable on the weather mast slapping against the siding. I even made a note in the log. Check mast cabling tomorrow. I believed that. I really did. I went about my day, did my checks, and even laughed at myself for getting spooked by a piece of plastic hitting a metal pole. But the next night, the sound moved. In the audio logs from 2:15 a.m., the thumping wasn't coming from the direction of the mast anymore. It was coming from the south perimeter, near the solar array. And this time, it was faster. It wasn't a steady rhythm anymore, it was erratic. It sounded like something was stumbling. I remember sitting in the dark of the trailer that night, listening to the live feed through my headphones. The desert outside was pitch black. The infrared on the cameras doesn't reach very far, maybe 30 feet before the light just gets swallowed by the void. I watched the monitors for 3 hours. I saw nothing but the wind moving the sagebrush. I started to rationalize it as thermal expansion. The desert gets incredibly cold at night, and the metal frames of the solar panels can groan and pop as they contract. That's a real thing. Every tech who goes out there talks about the ghosts in the metal. I convinced myself that's all it was. I even felt a bit of pride for staying so clinical about it. By week 4, the isolation started to feel different. Usually by the midpoint, you stop noticing the silence. It just becomes the background. But at Site 9, the silence felt heavy, like it was pressing against the windows. I found myself avoiding the windows at night. The trailer has these thick plexiglass panes, and when the lights are on inside, they turn into black mirrors. I'd be brushing my teeth or making tea, and I'd catch my own reflection, and for a split second, I'd think someone was standing right behind the glass, looking in. It's a common trick of the light, but I started taping cardboard over the windows anyway. I told my supervisor on the weekly radio check that I was doing it to keep the heat in. "Everything okay out there, Elias?" he asked. His voice was fuzzy with static. "Yeah," I said. "Just the usual. It's quiet." "Copy that. 2 weeks left. Keep the sensors clean." The thumping continued every night, but I stopped listening to the audio logs. I told myself it was better for my mental health if I just ignored the thermal expansion. If I didn't hear it, it wasn't happening. Then came the morning of day 36. I went out for my perimeter walk. The sun was just hitting the horizon, turning the lake bed a bruised purple. I walked toward the solar array to check for dust buildup. When I got there, I saw something that stopped me cold. One of the support struts for the third panel was bent. Not just warped by heat, it was buckled, as if something with immense weight had leaned against it. I knelt down in the silt to look for tracks. The ground out there is like flour, it records everything. But there were no footprints, just a series of circular depressions in the dirt. They were about the size of a dinner plate, spaced out in a way that made no sense. They didn't look like feet, they looked like impacts. I stood there for a long time, looking at those holes in the ground. My brain was working overtime to find a normal explanation. Maybe a weather balloon had come down and dragged across the dirt. Maybe a piece of space debris. I took photos, logged the damage, and went back inside. I didn't leave the trailer for the rest of the day. That night, the sound changed again. It wasn't thumping anymore. It was a scraping sound. Something was moving along the side of the trailer. Scrape, stop, scrape, stop. It was slow, deliberate. It sounded like a fingernail on a chalkboard, but magnified. It went on for 4 hours. I sat on the floor in the middle of the kitchen area, as far from the walls as I could get. I had my bear spray in one hand and my radio in the other. I didn't call for help. What would I say? I hear a scraping sound. They'd pull me off the job and I'd lose my contract. I needed the money. I kept telling myself I was just being a city boy who couldn't handle the desert. It's just the wind blowing a branch against the side, I whispered to the empty room. There are no trees for 50 miles. I knew that. But I chose to believe the lie because the alternative didn't have a shape. The last week was a blur of sleep deprivation and caffeine. I stopped recording my own voice logs because my voice sounded like a stranger's, thin and shaky. I just focused on the countdown. 5 days, 4 days, 3 days. The scraping happened every night. Sometimes it was on the roof. Sometimes it was under the floorboards in the crawl space. The most disturbing part wasn't the sound itself, but the weight of it. When the scraping was on the roof, the ceiling panels would actually flex downward slightly. Whatever was up there was heavy. On the final night, the night before the transport truck was supposed to pick me up, the sound stopped. I sat in total silence for 6 hours. No wind, no thumping, no scraping. It was the most terrifying night of the trip because the absence of the sound felt like a trap. I felt like I was being watched by something that had finally decided to be still. When the truck pulled up at 8 a.m. the next morning, I almost cried. The driver, a guy named Dave I'd known for years, looked at me and frowned. "Jesus, Elias, you look like you've been through a blender. You okay?" "Just didn't sleep much," I said, tossing my bags into the cab. The wind was brutal this time. Wind. Dave looked around the perfectly still, glass-flat desert. "Data says it's been a dead calm for a week." "Must have been local to the site," I muttered. I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to leave. I spent the first 24 hours back in my apartment sleeping. I had the windows blacked out and the door triple bolted. When I finally woke up, I felt foolish. The desert madness had worn off. I was back in civilization. There were cars outside, people walking dogs, the hum of the refrigerator. The fear felt like a dream. On the second day back, I sat down at my desk to compile my final report. I had to sync my personal handheld recorder, the one I used to dictate my daily notes, with the station's master seismic log to ensure the data timestamps matched. I started with the audio from day 36, the day I found the bent strut. I listened to my own voice, found damage on panel 3. Looks like impact. No tracks, just these weird holes in the dirt, probably a fallen drone or something. Then I opened the seismic file for that same minute. The seismic sensors at Site 9 are incredibly sensitive. They pick up footsteps within 50 yards. They definitely pick up a human walking. On the log, I could see my own footsteps clearly, neat, rhythmic spikes in the graph as I walked to the panel and back. But there was something else on the graph. Directly under my footsteps, there was a second set of vibrations. They were much heavier than mine. Each time I took a step, this other thing took a step a fraction of a second later. It was mimicking my pace perfectly. While I was standing there looking at the bent strut, the seismic log showed that something was standing exactly 6 feet behind me. My heart started racing. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck. I shifted the audio to the night logs, the nights of the scraping. I listened to the recording from 3 a.m. on day 40. On my handheld recorder, you can hear me breathing, fast, shallow breaths. You can hear the scraping on the roof of the trailer. It sounds like a metal rake being dragged across the shingles. Then I looked at the station's internal pressure sensors. Site 9's trailer is airtight to keep out the dust. It monitors internal versus external pressure. I noticed a series of spikes I hadn't seen before. Every time the scraping happened, the internal pressure dropped slightly, as if the trailer was being squeezed. But that's not what made me drop my headset. I went back to the very first audio log, day 1, the hour after Dave dropped me off and drove away. I was alone. I was supposed to be completely alone for 80 miles in every direction. I played the audio of myself walking into the trailer for the first time. I heard the door click shut. I heard myself sigh and drop my keys on the table. Then on the recording, there was a sound I hadn't heard at the time. It was a voice, not a human voice. It sounded like the wind caught in a pipe, but it had the cadence of speech. It was faint, coming from somewhere inside the trailer, somewhere close. It said my name, Elias. I didn't hear it when I was there. My brain must have filtered it out as white noise or static, but now, in the safety of my apartment, it was unmistakable. I started frantically scrolling through the rest of the logs. I stopped at the final night, the night of the total silence. I looked at the seismic graph. It wasn't flat. While I was sitting on the kitchen floor, believing I was finally safe, the ground under the trailer was vibrating at a frequency so high it was almost off the charts. It wasn't a thump or a scrape. It was a constant, intense tremor. And then I found the last photo. I had an automated trail camera pointed at the door of the trailer, meant to catch if any unauthorized person approached the site. I had downloaded the SD card, but hadn't looked at the images yet. I opened the folder. There were 400 images. Most of them were of nothing, just the dirt and the sagebrush. But there was one from 4:12 a.m. on the final night. The camera is triggered by motion. In the photo, the door to the trailer is closed. I am inside, terrified, holding my bear spray. But in the corner of the frame, right at the edge of the infrared light, there is something. It isn't a person. It isn't an animal. It's a shape. It looks like a tall, thin column of something that reflects light like oily water. It has no face, no limbs that I can see, but it is leaning. It is leaning at a 45-degree angle, its top section pressed firmly against the roof of my trailer. And it's transparent. I can see the stars through its body. But what stopped my breath wasn't the shape itself. It was the fact that the camera had been triggered because the door handle was turning. In the photo, you can see the metal handle of the trailer door is pushed all the way down. The only reason that thing didn't get in was because I had accidentally jammed the lock when I was shaking so hard. The deadbolt hadn't fully engaged, but the metal had slipped and wedged the mechanism shut. I remembered struggling with the key that morning when Dave arrived. I thought it was just the dust in the lock. I haven't gone back to the office. I haven't turned in the report. I've been sitting in my apartment for 3 days now. I keep the lights off. I don't use the heater or the AC because I need to be able to hear. The problem is, about an hour ago, I heard a sound. It didn't come from the street. It didn't come from the neighbors. It was a rhythmic thud coming from the hallway right outside my bedroom door. Thump, pause, thump, pause. It sounds like something heavy hitting the carpet, something that doesn't have feet, but knows exactly how I walk. I'm looking at the door right now. The handle hasn't moved yet, but I can feel the air pressure in the room changing. The walls are starting to feel thin, and for the first time in my life, I realize that isolation isn't about being alone. Isolation is about being the only one who knows what's standing right behind you. I don't think the desert lets you leave. I think it just waits until you're somewhere you think is safe, and then it reminds you that the thermal expansion was never the metal. It was the sound of something trying to fit into a shape it wasn't meant to have. The handle just jiggled. I'm not opening the door. I'm just going to sit here in the dark. Maybe if I don't record it, it isn't really happening. That worked for 6 weeks, right? But I can hear it breathing now, and it sounds just like the wind.